Well, earlier I was speaking to the Education Minister, Gillian, and I began by asking her how much confidence we should have in today's results.
We should be very confident in these results. Massive well done to all students actually who've picked up their results this week. If you consider that they've had to overcome the biggest disruption in education since the Second World War, and everybody's had to adapt to new ways of doing things, the teachers have done an amazing job. But each one of these results has been evidenced by the work of the student, either through mock exams or assessments or a whole range of things that teachers have used to evidence the knowledge that students have and their ability, and obviously the grades reflect that.
This system was forced on us by the pandemic and by all the disruption. And if that's the case, people must be wondering why the government is so against going back to a mixture of coursework and exams.
Well, we have different courses, and we're not only celebrating A-levels and GCSEs, which get the mountain of airtime, but also BTECs and many other vocational and technical qualifications, all of which actually do have a lot of modular assessment along the way and a lot of coursework. So there is a whole range of options and choices at both level 2 and at level 3. But when they looked at the GCSE system, what they found, and when these were reforms that took place over the last few years, I think 2015-16, what they found was that there was more of the teaching time was going on the coursework, and actually it was taking up too much teaching time. So that's why we went back to the system, which was the system that we had in our day probably, which was where it was largely exams and then coursework for those subjects that require coursework.
Are you fundamentally opposed to teacher assessment then?
Oh, no. I mean, obviously, exams are the fairest system. That is something that we all know. They are the fairest system. They're the fairest way to assess a young person's ability. But as you said, the disruption, it would have been very unfair to do exams because the disruption was unequal. It was in different parts of the country, different types of school. It would have been very unfair on certain students to do exams, which is why we've had this broad range of evidence. The teachers who know their students best have been put in that place. And a massive thank you to them. They've really stood up that system.
But there are some bleak realities here. And one is the absolute confirmation that, yes, London is doing very well, but the North is doing badly. And we know why. It's inequality. And you said you were going to be dealing with inequality. You've been in power a very long time. Inequality is not improving.
Inequality actually was improving, and there's two measures of that. So since 2011 up to 2019, so until the pandemic, we'd actually narrowed the attainment gap between disadvantaged pupils and other pupils. So at the age of 11, we'd narrowed it by 13%, and the age of 16, we'd narrowed it by 9%.
But we're talking about today. We're talking about today, and the figures do not look good.
It has been put off track a bit by the pandemic. I think that's for sure true. And whilst we did everything we could, tried to get devices out to disadvantaged pupils, tried to get, BBC Bite Size, the Oak National Academy, there's about 100 million views of lessons now that everybody's had. But of course, there was an uneven disruption at the beginning. It took us a while to respond. Inequality is there in this country. There is absolutely no doubt. And you see it not just in cities and towns, you see it in coastal areas, you see it in the north versus the south, you see it in rural areas as well.
So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it?
That's why levelling up is at the very heart of everything we're doing. That's why we're focused on making sure everybody gets access to a really good or outstanding education.